Hello, ladies and gentlemen. We finally have the full banners for 4.5, and so I thought I'd make a video giving my opinion on them, right? So, without much further ado, let's just get straight into the juice. Now, let's get the obvious out of the way. Robin first half and Aventurine second half, right? However, the reruns are Huasene rerunning alongside Robin, and Asheville rerunning alongside Avon. Right. Now, this video I'm sure is going to be a little interesting to you guys, because Aventurine has gotten consistently buffed throughout all the versions, so a lot of people would probably like to know my opinion on Avon now, compared to a few versions ago. I imagine most of you already know what I want to say about Robin, so that's probably the least exciting part, but I'll still go through it, right? So, let's go in order here. Robin SP. I don't really need to say much. This character has the highest value in the entirety of the game as it currently stands. Now, as I said in a recent video, does this mean she's a must pull? Does this mean that you need her on your teams to clear endgame? Absolutely not. However, is she probably the highest valuable unit in the game currently? Yes, that just means you can get a lot out of her, right? And unlike a lot of older supports where they have a pretty good E1 but it kind of stops there and then the E2 is mid, she actually has both a great overall team damage increase in both the E1 and the E2. So she has two good vertical investments to go into if you just want to stomp everything in the current day, or your goal is to make her last as long as possible into the future, right? She gives 40% defense shred at max vibe stacks. She gives 30% damage bonus because she never takes another turn, meaning this damage bonus buff basically stays forever. She gives 16% vulnerability. Her Lycone has speed buffing. She also has crit damage and attack buffing, with specifically the attack percent buffing being very, very potent for people who like attack buffs. She has a good E1 where it records the entire team's damage on average. It's like a 20+% overall team damage increase, kind of like a Cypher ult. And then the E2 increases her max vibe stacks, and this means that now her cap defense shred is 50% instead of 40%, and her crit damage and attack buffs are also increased by around 25%, I believe, as well, right? However, in one of the later versions, they added 20% res pen to this E2 on top of what it already does, making it way, way stronger than it was before. So the E2 is very, very potent. Now, they did nerf the res pen by just a measly 2%. However, it's still an incredibly high value Eidolon, and because she's the only buffer in the game whose main buffing is defense shred, this is really good for a lot of current DPSs and even older ones like Mono Rem. Cassie gives herself 30% defense shred with her Lycone. Evernight gives team-wide 20% defense shred with her Lycone, and this means with an E2 Robin, you actually can hit 100% defense shred at max vibes, which is very, very strong. And then you also have characters like Phanon, who can get defense shred from his Lycone, and Ceridra E1, which a lot of people do choose to run since they've already pulled for it. Himiko as well. Even Silverwolf. If you have, let's say, Silverwolf's Lycone with her on the Elation Relic set, then you have a E1 Yao Guang. Robin, even without her E2, I believe, is able at max vibes to get the team to 100% defense shred. Defense shred is becoming a much more commonplace buff in this age, meaning there's a lot of value that you can get out of another defense shred buffer with the way it works, right? Because most other buffs in this game become weaker in terms of increasing overall team damage the more you have of it. Defense shred is the only one that's not like this, and instead increases in value up to 100%, right? So Robin SP, incredibly high value. However, once again, this is not a must pull character. You can definitely get by without pulling her and I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of the teams from version 4 that she's currently best in slot for will no longer have her as a best in slot, even if she's still a really good alternative by the end of this version, right? Moving on, we have Huasene. This is an interesting one, right? It's interesting for me as well. This is my mono-rem account, actually, that has E2S1 Cassie, E2S1 Evernight, but only an E0S0 Huasene, meaning her E1 is a pretty hefty buff for this mono-rem team, and I am starting to consider it. However, that aside, how good do I really think she is in this day and age? Huasene's value, in my opinion, is just a tiny bit questionable, right? I cannot deny the fact that as of current day, if we're talking about a sustain in their best team, how strong are they? Huasene obviously wins, right? A lot of people don't know this, but Huasene actually starts becoming a bit of a generalist buffer in a way when paired with Robin SP, because Robin SP's buffs do to a certain extent scale off of Robin's own max HP percent. And because of Huasene's ability to increase team-wide HP percent, and then with her E1 even further so, this increases, I believe, the attack and crit damage buffs that Robin can provide, right? So with this being the case, yes, Huasene can technically be a generalist buffer alongside alongside Robin SP, kind of similar to a Donhung PT, and makes her much more universally usable in teams that aren't just HP scaling, right? But the thing is, you do need Robin SP for you to get this type of value for Huasene outside of her niche teams. However, in fairness, it is a bit unfair that I'm not considering her niche teams, in which, like Cassie and any HP scalers, to be honest, they really appreciate her because of the max HP buffing and the healing, being able to give them more charge or just have good synergy in general, right? But the reason I'm just a bit skeptical is because we haven't gotten any new version sustains yet. I've always said this, new version sustains, new version anything, is going to be stronger than the previous version. And more often than not, they end up being stronger than most people anticipate. A lot of people think, oh, maybe this character is still better in their niche, in comparison to this newer sustain that's going to release, which just almost never ends up being the case, unfortunately. The newer version sustains are usually just that much stronger than older ones that they almost completely remove them from a majority of their teams, with, in my opinion, really the only exception in here is Huo, and that's simply because she has no competition, as there is no other sustain who provides the energy buffing that she does, right? But in terms of damage or SP positivity, or even with, like, Donhung PT, we're starting to get there. Generalist buffing, we are starting to get to a point, in my opinion, where if we get, let's say, a generalist sustain in this version, and they have a stronger kit than even Huasene or Donhung, there's a real chance that, for example, this sustain could be better than Huasene, even in some of her niche teams, right? The ones that don't like her healing as much. For example, like My Day, right? My Day is someone who can use Huasene, and I believe Huasene is his best in slot sustain, but the synergy is nowhere near on the same level as the synergy Huasene has with Cassie, for example, because My Day prefers his own healing, his own high single target healing, especially with Eidolons like E2, while Cassie is the one who prefers the weaker AoE healing, which is exactly what Huasene does, right? So Huasene, in my opinion, is a bit of a 50-50. With current information, with stuff we currently have, she's still one of the best sustains in the entirety of the game. And if you're only missing out on one more sustain to, let's say, clear endgame content, and that's something you really just want to get over with, then yeah, I could see the value in pulling a Huasene. However, I'm just a bit skeptical because in 4.6, right after this patch of 4.5, you're instantly going to have Pearl, who is leaked as a sustain. And in my opinion, I do think that in this future HSR X ZZZ collab, Astra will probably be the second limited sustain that we get in this version, and likely the free character from the ZZZ collab. So I just don't know, right? I really don't know. It's hard. I feel like I'll be able to give a bit more of a concrete opinion on Hyacene's value maybe when Pearl's beta actually comes around, which we will be able to see before her banner goes away, which is good news, right? But that's a lot of yapping on Hyacene. I need to move on at this point. So next we have Aven. Now this is the one, once again, most people are probably interested in my opinion for, because I did say that his value was trash. And I'm going to be completely honest with you guys, I still do hold this opinion, right? Now, is his value better than what it was before? Yes. He is stronger as a DPS. His Elation teams, I believe he's one of, if not the best Elation DPS currently, right? However, I do think it's getting a little overhyped by some people trying to agenda post the rest of the Elation DPSs. However, nonetheless, what's for certain is that he's great as an Elation DPS. And then the changes to certain beta versions that slightly increased his synergy with Fua more and increasing his fervor stacks more consistently have increased his value in the Fua team, right? But he still has this issue, in my opinion, where because they went with him being good in two different teams instead of being great in one, there's a bit of an issue where he's very replaceable, right? For example, if you're looking for an Elation team, you have like 3 or 4 other options. And then if you are looking for someone with the Fua team, any future generalist support that releases could very likely just be stronger than him in this Fua team. In my opinion, the main value of Aventurine is in the Fua team with his high levels of vertical investment, like E2 or higher. He has very, very good Eidolon scaling, meaning he goes further and further away ahead of other options, even at the same investment as him, because his Eidolons are just that good and made to synergize that well in his Fua teams or Elation teams, right? So if you are someone who is willing to go into that level of investment, then he is finally this great DPS, in my opinion, for a team. However, at base, I'm going to be honest, I really still do have the same opinion. He is way too easily replaceable on this Fua team. You can use Robin SP with Hyacene, and I'm pretty sure at equal low investment, she does beat him, or it's very, very close either way, right? And then it's only at higher investments once again where he finally starts, you know, kind of gapping her, because you're finally doing more damage. The problem with Aven, though, in my opinion, when you bring up the investment argument, is E2 Emblade is stronger for the Fua team than E2 Aven in a way, right? The way you play Aven in a Fua team is you basically forego kind of the damage output of Asheville and Emblade, all to just generate resources for Aven to function. And then the way the Robin SP team works with the Fua team is that Asheville and Emblade are the main DPSs. They are getting supported, and their damage is what's carrying it. So the problem here is the best investment in the Fua team is E2 Emblade. However, E2 Emblade is highly unsynergistic with Aven, while being highly synergistic in the team with Robin, where he and Asheville are the main DPSs. So when it comes to, like, you know, opportunity cost, kinda, if anyone's invested already into Eidolons for Emblade, E1 or E2, I'd actually argue that it's probably just better to keep running Robin than it is to actually run it with Aven. Although, you can still run it with Aven. Please do not misunderstand me saying what is most optimal for what you must do. A lot of people confuse this, and I hope I'm not trying to, you know, inflict FOMO on anybody to suddenly forgo their favorite character just to pull Robin, right? Either way, you can use the both of them, and they both work well in that Fua team. It's just that Robin's value is 10 times higher, 100 times higher than Avin's outside of the Fua team. Because when you really think about it, she doesn't really care about being best in slot on the Fua team, right? Like, she's best in slot everywhere else too, you know? So it's not much of a loss to her, even if Avin were to be a bit better than her at low cost, but it is what it is. Moving on to Asheville. Obviously, Asheville is like a must pick if you're trying to do this M-Blade Asheville team. I feel like this is the real, like, this is the most no-brainer pull possible, because you really only look at Asheville usually for his Fua team, and it's like, yeah, I'd pull him for the Fua team, you know? He has a very high damage output. He gets passive energy regen from frequent attacks on people hitting an enemy that he's marked, right? And his E1 is great. His base kit buffing is great for a hunt character. He's not a debuffer. He's not a buffer, yet he still has pretty high levels of buffing in just his base kit. So yeah, he's really a no-brainer for these Fua teams. In fact, I believe he's more important to Asheville being ran in a type of Fua S team than even M-Blade is. Is some of this to do with the fact that M-Blade's damage bonus buffing and E2 damage bonus buffing doesn't really work with Avin? Yes. And so you can replace Avin with Robin SP, or sorry, you can replace M-Blade with Robin SP alongside Asheville and Avin, and it works pretty well. Right, that is a real thing, I guess, if anybody wanted to know that out there. But it's just, you know, yeah. So Asheville, yeah, must pull if you're going into Fua, or, you know, specifically just Fua, in my opinion. Yeah, must pull. Outside of that, you don't really need to care about this guy at all, though. I'm going to be honest. There were some people doing some weird team comps when he first released, when there were no other version 4 supports. However, now that Robin SP exists and M-Blade exists, they're probably just going to be better in any type of weird team comp than Asheville would be. So, yeah, I mean, I really just don't see any reason to pull him if you're not pulling him for Fua. As for Eidolons, E1 is good, 36% vulnerability on one enemy. If they're below 50% HP, and 24% if they're above. So on average, it's like 30% vulnerability. It's a pretty strong E1. However, Asheville does have terrible Eidolons after this E1. Like, the personal damage increases are really bad. And by the way, this is basically the only reason why Asheville, Avin, and M-Blade actually beats Asheville, M-Blade, and Robin at higher investments. It's simply the fact that Asheville has no good personal damage increases in his Eidolons at all. And if he had, for example, like Avin level of personal damage increases, for example, like Evernight-esque with her E2, then he would definitely have the stronger team, and you wouldn't need to pull Avin at all, even at higher investments. But that's not the case, right? That's just not the case. So it is what it is. What are you going to do about it? So, yeah, that's my thoughts on the upcoming 4 banners for the next version. I feel like I really yapped a lot in this video. This has to be like a 14 or 15 minute long video. I don't know. I'll check after this. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Hope you all have a great day. Hope you all have a great night. Peace out.